Welcome to the Unscripted Authentic Leadership Podcast, a podcast where we're seeking to lead change while also seeking to understand. We are also here to provide a platform for leaders to come to unite and develop in the areas of business, family, faith, and community. I am your host, Lafayette Lane, joined by my co-host, John LeBron, and today we are joined by a special guest, Amy Lynn Durham. We are here to have a conversation around creating a positive culture at work. Before we tell you a little bit more about Amy and get into the conversation, we definitely want to say thank you to all of our supporters, those of you that are watching. You see that ticker at the bottom of your screen that are part of our YouTube channel there, Unscripted Authentic Leadership. You can also follow us on our various social media platforms. Our Instagram handles at Unscripted Leadership, also LinkedIn, Unscripted Authentic Leadership. You can also find us on our various streaming platforms, from Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, iHeart Radio, Stitcher, and really wherever podcasts are offered. You can find us on any podcast streaming platform. You can also find us there on our website, unscripted-leadership.com. And we also want you to follow Amy. Amy, she's there on various platforms there. On the website is create.magic.net. She has those two LinkedIn profiles. That's Amy Lynn Durham and also Create Magic at Work. Her Instagram handle is Create Magic at Work. Also, you can find her on YouTube, Amy Lynn Durham, and also on Facebook, Create Magic at Work. We also will get more into her book. She's written a book called Create Magic at Work. We also want you to support her there. Amy Lynn Durham, as I said, is our guest today, and she is the founder of Create Magic at Work. She's also a UC Berkeley certified executive coach. She's also certified to coach in the 21 skills associated with spiritual intelligence, or SQ, using the SQ21 Assessment, and an emotional intelligence practitioner. She's also spent years in the corporate world, successfully managing hundreds of employees for private and publicly traded companies. She created Magic at Work's intention is to offer spiritual intelligence, which is SQ, and emotional intelligence, EQ, to energize and transform the workplace. So she has a lot to offer our audience. And at this time, I want to turn it over to Amy. She could tell us a little bit more about herself. Amy?
Yeah, wow, that was everything Create Magic at Work. So a little bit to add on to that, I guess, is I want everyone to know that I did work in the corporate space for a really long time as a corporate executive. And personally, I went through feelings of loneliness and burnout and things like that. I was fortunate enough to be able to plan to leave my job and exit that space, travel a little bit, write my book, Create Magic at Work, become an executive coach. And now I've been re-injecting myself back into the workplace to bring heart and human connection to places that need it the most.
That is awesome. And you're from, is it Clovis, California? Clovis? I haven't heard that name. Where's that by?
I'm from Clovis, California. It's in the middle. I used to get, I don't want to say made fun of at work, but my coworkers would sort of joke about Clovis because it's a small town in the middle of California. It's a kind of a cowboy ag place.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Do you know where Mojave is by chance?
Yes, the desert.
I grew up there. Yes.
Okay. There you go.
That was in the middle of nowhere. Yes.
Yeah.
Legit. The highlight was a place called Silver Saddle, a cowboy bar. That's cowboy. Anyway.
Yeah, it's not as I don't want to say as bad as that, but it's a fun little small town. I used to travel. I used to run the Bay Area. And it was a nice little cozy place to come back to and be peaceful after being in an airplane. I traveled all over the Western United States for my job. So kind of nice to settle back into my little peaceful spot in Clovis when I would be done traveling.
Yeah. Well, let's get into the conversation, guys. I think this is going to be great. And for those of you that are listening, our topic, our launching pad is creating a positive culture at work. What a pertinent and relevant topic, especially the space that we've been in for the last year and a half, where the workspace just has shifted. It's pivoted. That's a word that we use here on Unscripted. It's pivoted, and it looks different for everybody, the workspace entirely, whether that's manufacturing, whether that's the corporate America, whatever work setting that is. And we want to talk about how to create a positive culture at work. Amy, that's kind of your niche. And so how did you come about, having an interest in coming about creating this SQ, which you'll explain a little bit later, the spiritual intelligence and the emotional intelligence? Tell us a little bit more. Tell our audience, what does that look like, and what does that mean to create a positive culture at work?
So it's connecting people and getting everyone to see the humanity in each other. That's really the deep, short answer from it. But there's a lot of work that needs to go into that. And there's two parts that I bring to that. The first is the SQ21 piece. It's a tangible set of 21 skills that's faith neutral, that you can be assessed on to help grow in your journey as a leader. So that's sort of like, let me take a look in the mirror, let me do some inner work and get better as a leader. And then I bring Create Magic at Work to the table, where it's like fun team build type things that you can do as a leader with your employees. So it brings the fun, magical connecting piece to it, but then it also has that deep inner work with the SQ21.
Absolutely. You talk about the SQ and the SQ21, the spiritual intelligence, the emotional intelligence. What is that, firstly? Yeah. And what, I know you talked about being kind and doing the work and creating that connection at work, besides just going to work and clocking in and clocking out. But what is that spiritual intelligence? Kind of unpack what that is, and let's dive deeper into what that SQ is.
Yeah, let's do that. I think that's good. Thanks for taking me back to that. So what I like to explain is, if anyone studies psychology and is familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, he kind of has a pyramid that shows what each individual needs in their life. So picture a pyramid that's similar to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but the bottom of the pyramid is PQ, physical intelligence. The next step from that is IQ. Then the next layer of the pyramid is EQ, and then the top is SQ. So I explain it in a few different ways. Let's say you're born. You have to learn how to walk. You have to learn how to crawl. You have to learn how to eat. You have to learn how to do certain things, right? You're sort of developing your PQ. Then you kind of go to school and maybe you learn how to read and write and some math skills. Those sorts of things are contributing to your IQ. Then in the adult development theory, when we hit our early to mid 20s is when we can really start developing our emotional intelligence, which is EQ. And that's where you can start really having compassion. And I want to preface this by, we're all human. There's exceptions. Maybe someone has tremendous EQ when they're 5. I don't know, but this is all, with the adult development theory. So that's where you can really start having compassion and expanding your worldview besides your own. Understanding that your worldview isn't the only worldview. Then you get to SQ by way of EQ. So EQ is, okay, I've created some self-awareness of my emotions. I've created an emotional management strategy for those. And I'm able to create emotional connections with others. I'm able to build a bridge. I'm able to see other people's point of view. And then SQ is where you take it to the next level. The definition of spiritual intelligence is, this is one of them. It's from Cindy Wigglesworth, who developed the assessment, is the ability to maintain inner and outer peace, regardless of any situation. And when I share that definition, I often laugh, because that is a very tall order for any human being to perform at, is the ability to maintain inner and outer peace regardless of the situation. However, It's a lifelong journey of skill building that can help you sustain faith during difficult times, make wise and compassionate decisions, et cetera, et cetera. Did that help kind of lay it out?
Absolutely, because again, going back to the space that we are in, there's so much chaos on the inside, there's chaos on the outside, not just in the workspace, but a lot of times what's brought into the workspace is because of what has occurred before we get to work, you know. And so having that spiritual intelligence is a term that I've never heard of. I've heard of the EQ and IQ. We've had episodes here on the podcast concerning that. I've read books about EQ and emotional intelligence. I never heard of the physical intelligence either. And so I think that all of those are come together to formulate a human being and to be successful in life. Do you want to pivot into what that SQ21 assessment is, and how does that help us out, not just in work, but I think that this is a principle that we know we're talking about creating a positive culture at work, but I think it's a principle that can apply to just a leader in every aspect of your life. So what about
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's why this is so important, in my opinion, is because it does contribute to every aspect of your life. It makes you a better person overall. It's tough, deep work. I'll just share a personal story. If you want to talk, I'll talk a little bit about SQ21. So on my assessment, I scored a little bit lower than I would have liked on being a calm and healing presence. And so for the year 2021, I said, hey, I'm going to work on being a calm and healing presence. I really want to work on that. I came from a very competitive corporate culture. You know, I can get very feisty. I can pop off like with the best of them. And so, you know, it was funny that I came back a little lower than I thought on being a calm and healing presence. Once you pick a skill to work on, and you can pick many, or maybe some don't mean that much to you, and you're fine where you are with that skill level. It's interesting how you'll get opportunities in your life that arise all of a sudden. It's almost like when you buy a white car, you see more white cars on the street. It's like I chose to be a calm and healing presence, and now I have been given all of these opportunities to practice that. And be careful what you pick is what I'm saying when you do the 21 skills, because sometimes I have failed when that test has been brought to me many times. And what I do like to share is, as long as we recognize, repair, and recover when those opportunities, you know, hit us, I think that's the biggest piece. And it's like, thank you for the lesson. Let me try again tomorrow. Thank you for the lesson. So that's one skill, being a calm and healing presence. And I want to share, I was really beating myself up over not being a calm and healing presence when I picked it these first 3 months. I was like, man, I keep losing it. I got a little puppy and I was potty training him, and it was just, you know, he would have accidents, of course, because I'm potty training a little puppy. And I was losing my center quite a bit. He's the cutest thing ever, by the way. And then in other situations with like personal relationships, those I think can trigger us the most, way more than work. Because at work, we're required to be at this standard as a leader. And, you know, the personal relationships are really the lessons in our life. They're the spiritual lessons in our life. And I was, in my opinion, failing on that front as well. And I was laying in bed one night and I was beating myself up over it. And it hit me that I don't have to be this big, peaceful, you know, zened out yogi or whatever it is to be a calm and healing presence. And what that really means to me, and what my lesson was that as long as people in my presence can operate, can feel me operating from a space of wisdom, love, and compassion, and if they start operating from that place because of my presence, then I've won in my mind. Won, I shouldn't say won. I'm winning or losing, right? But then I've achieved a little bit of growth in that skill.
Sure.
So I broke down one skill out of the 21 for you as a personal story. That one's in quadrant 4. It's called social mastery. So it's when people start seeing, other people start noticing, hey, I feel really calm and healing in your presence. I'm working on it. Do you feel calm right now? I'm just kidding.
Little piece.
I think that's good. I want to
Inner
let
and
John,
outer.
yeah. I want to let John get into his questions, but I do want to just say that was good. The 2 words that stick out to me was the repair and recover. Because, you know, we all have shortcomings. We all have things that we want to improve on, but you didn't allow those things to stop you. You didn't quit. You used them as a lesson to repair and recover. And so those of you that will watch this and listen to this, I think you need to put that on the forefront of your mind, that whatever shortcoming you have, whatever weakness that you deem as a weakness, you can repair and you can recover. John, go ahead, man. I know you got some questions you want to ask Amy.
Now, repair and recover is so critical. So many people are so afraid to just begin and start something.
Yeah.
Or they're so afraid to be a leader in whatever they feel like they should, because it's almost like they feel like they're not perfect enough to begin. And like, well, I'm not, you know, John Maxwell, so I can't get into leadership. Yeah. And if you know who John Maxwell is, he's sort of the world-renowned leadership guru. Anybody with leadership books probably has at least 10 of his. You know, he has, I think, 70 plus published best-selling books or something crazy. Like, it's ridiculous. Nobody's going to be like that, right? Like, you have to be Jesus to be a leader now. Yeah, I had this is a little bit random. So you had mentioned this spiritual quotient, or spiritual intelligence, as we call it. I feel like a lot of our listeners are going to hear that word, and they're going to be like, well, I'm not super religious, right? Do you ever get that? Like, or corporate is going to like steer away because the word spiritual. It's like if you use the word faith, right? If I ever use the word faith, someone says, oh, I'm not all that religious. I'm like, well, faith is not like necessarily, is it used in church? Of course, but it's not that. Faith is not necessarily a word used only when talking about Jesus. And so I talk to people about, what faith really means and so forth, and how just sitting in your chair, you have faith that it's not going to break, right? And stuff like that. It's a worldly thing. But can you talk about that just so everybody understands, like, this is something this is not about, and I'm all for the Bible and reading gospel, but I don't make everybody else all for that. And so when we say this spiritual quotient, what are we talking about here as far as corporate, and how can they be comfortable using this within their environment? So
I am so glad that you asked me that, because it's one of the best questions you could have asked me. SQ, spiritual intelligence, is faith neutral. That's why it's designed for the workplace. It uses language that can cross all religions, traditions. You can also be atheist. You can be agnostic. As long as you believe that there is a place within you that can come from wisdom, love, and compassion, which I like to call your higher self, you can work on your spiritual intelligence. And you just talked about faith a little bit, and I was sort of, one of the, I couldn't remember the number, but skill 15 in SQ is how can you sustain faith during difficult times? And this is a neutral language for the workplace, and leaders need it so bad, especially the leaders that are, let's use an example, managing COVID with their entire organization. How do you sustain faith during difficult times? This is like high level leadership. This is if you are a leader that has already kind of explored EQ, and you're wanting to learn more and skill build more. How do I sustain faith during difficult times? How do I weight lift on that? That's one of the skills. And it has nothing to do with religion, and it has everything to do with skill building on being a better person and being a highly developed leader. Because we want leaders in the workplace that are making wise and compassionate decisions. We want leaders that can sustain faith during difficult times. We want leaders that understand that there is more than just their worldview, that there is that everyone has their own worldview. We want leaders that can put their ego aside and operate from their higher self. And so the more you practice that skill, it's a skill that you practice. You recognize when you're triggered. You recognize when your ego is operating instead of your higher self. You just recognize, repair, recover, right? Keep trying to operate from your higher self. You get there quicker, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know why they chose to call it spiritual. I'm totally okay with it because I feel like it's accessing sort of that untangible thing that we all feel that maybe aren't with our normal physical senses, but we know that's there. But at the same time, the definition is the ability to maintain inner and outer peace regardless of the situation. It helps you put your own day-to-day concerns aside and operate from a more big picture view. And I would argue we want every leader to be able to do that if we're coming from a place of ethics and wanting everyone to do well in life.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's shift into, we're still talking about creating that culture, that positive culture at work.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to shift to how do we create opportunities for better team building?
Mm-hmm.
How do we create opportunities for better team building, especially when part of the team is in the physical building, part of the team is remote virtually.
Yeah.
One part of the team is in California, another's in Ohio, another's in Florida. But we all have to maintain some continuity in between our roles and our different positions that we play on the team. How do we do that when there's a distance between leaders?
I'm laughing a little bit because I was thinking about my old corporate job where we had expense budgets where we could take everyone out for cocktails and dinner and have a blast. And it was the inspiration for me writing a section in my book about loneliness in the workplace and how it contributes to burnout even more than workload. So I'm really glad you're basically asking me about how do we connect each other when we're so separated physically? How do we connect each other when we're patching in on Zoom now and there's Zoom fatigue? And really the answer is actually connecting with each other as humans. So I know we talked a little bit about before the show where you thought it was interesting that I brought up doing a team build at the end of a meeting. I really recommend that if it's a little bit of a lengthy one. Say you're doing a 15-minute journaling exercise. That's from my book. It's called Journaling with a Twist. There's a lot of journal prompt card decks out there. You can pull a topic for your team. I authored a journal prompt card deck for the workplace. So you can pull a topic and read an affirmation for everybody that's on the Zoom or in the room. And then there's 2 questions that prompt each individual to write about. You have them rapid write their answers for 5 to 10 minutes. Don't give them any more time to where they overthink it, and then everyone shares their answers. So if you have others sharing their personal answers, if they're comfortable, you start opening up the humanity within each other. And then you hear maybe what's going on in someone else's life. And maybe it's someone that kind of gets on your nerves in the workplace. And then you're like, wow, I didn't know Lafayette was going through that. I'm going to reach out to him and see if he needs help on this project because I didn't know that. And then boom, you have productivity, profitability because you did a human connecting activity.
Yeah. John, did you want to dig into the team building and how there was a different perspective I think Amy offered that we're not really familiar with? Kind of open that up, bro.
Yeah. So basically what you're just saying is, oops, sorry, I just took my camera, is we're just connecting as human beings again, right? And getting some of the best conversations are deep conversations. That's how you really get to know somebody. We used to talk about how Lafayette is not exactly, outside of here, the most talkative individual on earth. But when him and I would converse, he talks a lot. But we used to talk about things that mattered that we both thought were important. And so we could converse forever. But then other people would say, "You're doing a podcast?" Now, me, I talk all the time. So it was not really like, oh, but he mentioned, but he also preaches. And people are like,
Yes.
really? And he's very good at it. And so, when things matter, he's very excited to discuss. And so I feel like engaging on important topics is so encouraging to the individual, or I would say like it helps them bring out their own expressions and feel wanted and so forth. And yes, in your book, if you guys, for everybody who's listening, there's the book, as we mentioned, Create Magic at Work. Have it right here on my screen. It's a great book. I recommend everybody goes on her website and purchases it. I don't know if it's on Amazon or anything like that, but it's a quick read. You can read it in a day or two, and really in a couple hours. And there's loaded with examples. And Lafayette, you had mentioned, I think what you're referring to was, so you said we had addressed in your book, you had mentioned that one thing that you found that you recommended was start your meetings with the purpose of the meeting and then wrap up the meeting with the team building exercise. Is that what you're asking, Lafayette?
Yeah, about
We kind
covering
of
the
touched on
essential
that.
points of the meeting first. Yeah, and then
What's that?
yeah. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
So, I mean, what's the significance though, but
Mhm.
by flipping? So when I used to be in
Yeah.
corporate America, in
Mhm.
like a big company, and we would
Mhm.
always start those big meetings with the team building exercise, right? And then we would finish with the important stuff. What's the significance though of starting with the sort of the bullets and wrapping up with the team building?
It's good.
Yeah. So this is just field tested from me, and that's why I put it in the book. If you went back, and this is 2 years now from when I was gathering all of this field tested data with my employees, they didn't know I was using them for the book. If you went back and asked them what they remembered from a meeting, they're not going to tell you the data that we covered. They're going to tell you the connecting activity that we did. And that's what they're going to remember most. And so what I did in the meeting when I ended what I like to call on a high note with that is because it left them feeling super connected. Because if you start off in the beginning doing this really connecting activity and then you dive into like financial statements or presentations on quotas, goals, whatever you're talking about, the magic kind of gets lost with that. I like to send everybody off kind of feeling that high of connecting with each other. And then that's what they remember most. It's the Maya Angelou, people will forget what you said, they'll forget what you did, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. It's her quote. It's right there. And it's so true. And what happens is I don't really care what data was on there. I mean, I was very competitive and we would discuss it. But what I cared was they were working better together when they left. And it freed me up as their supervisor to do my job because they were handling things on their own, and we could elevate, win, be productive, be profitable. And it's so interesting that it's through authentic connection and not just hammering people on financials and data and different things like that. But what it takes is a leader that's willing to try it, because a lot of the leaders that are in high level positions in the workplace are men. And oftentimes men have been taught, unfortunately, that showing vulnerability is a weakness, especially in the workplace. And they have they have a defense that comes up where they don't want to show that they're vulnerable. Well, guess what? You're going to get left behind with other people that are doing this because
ego gets in the way a little bit.
Exactly. And you just have to try, and you just have to try something small, and it's going to feel uncomfortable, and that's okay. And if everybody laughs, I say, great, you did your job, because laughter is a stress reducer as well.
It's kind of like when I was teaching my son to give compliments. And I said, look, just when you first give an intentional compliment that's from the heart, it feels awkward because people don't do that a lot. But eventually it becomes a habit and it's just a normal thing for you. But the first couple of times you're like, should I say something? Right. When my last corporate, like big corporate job, we were looking for team building exercises. And this, I feel like this kind of goes in with what you're saying. And you look around the other departments and they're doing things like, let's go bowling. And they would go bowling, or just spending corporate dollars on and hours on what they're allowed to do. So most of them do like a bowling thing or a breakout room or something like that, which is fine. I'm not against it. But we were new into the supervisor thing. And I'm thinking, that seems great, but I don't see how they're connecting more by bowling. Like, there's no conversation. You're not getting to know the other person. I mean, a little bit outside of work, but to what level? So we decided to seek out a way of servitude. So, and we said, hey, we're looking to serve something as a team. And so, hey guys, if you have any ideas, throw them into this pot and we will read them all and come up with a few. And as a team, we'll decide. So we ended up, somebody had a great charity called Shoes for the Shoeless. And basically it was about going into schools with this organization and fitting young children who were not fortunate enough to have well-fitted shoes, or any shoes sometimes, with brand new shoes. Seems simple, but what we found was it was the best team building exercise ever. Some people continued. A lot of people would donate time outside of work. They loved the charity so much. But what you found was you found this slight bond with the other associates, because then you realize that, like, okay, so you didn't like James or whatever. There was no James. But say you didn't like James at work. You just kind of didn't connect with them. We thought he was kind of awkward. But then when you start serving in a similar area with him, and you start to see, like, wow, he really cares for these kids. And it makes you see them in another sort of facet or different light. And I found that we had really connected as a team at another level by all serving for a cause that had nothing to do with us, versus bowling, right? And then afterwards, of course, there's all the conversations of, did you see that little kid, so-and-so? And, oh my gosh, yes, this young girl, she was wearing shoes that were 4 sizes too small. I can't believe it. We have to do something else for this, or, all these things. And you would start to see people who maybe you at work, you thought they don't work as hard as me. And then in this opportunity, you start to see them serving and you see them as a different person. So it's a long-winded explanation, but just something that we had done that I feel like is similar to what you're talking about in some of these exercises.
Very similar, and really great story on something that you can do. I put all those team build activities in the book. So not so you just follow each one, but so it inspires you to think of more. It's sort of a jumping off point, a foundation. That's a great offer to the audience listening on things that they can do. And you mentioned a couple of things that sort of stood out to me. You said they chose to maybe do it outside on their personal time as well. And that sort of stuck out to me, because we want to make sure that when we do team build at work, that we are mindful of people's personal lives and personal time, and that we're not encroaching on that, because that is not going to create harmony in the workplace when we're doing that. So I wanted to point that out. And I'm feeling like I should add, and I'm just going to add it, women get this a lot in the workplace. I'm just going to say it. And I've experienced it personally myself. And it comes in under the guise of advancing women in the workplace, but oftentimes they're told that they need to do more trainings, or they need to attend some additional things that are unpaid and things like that. So, and this is women are mainly in charge of, if you run the data, they're still handling quite a bit of the household duties more than men. So if you think about it, you're adding to someone that already has a very large workload, and you're implying that there's something wrong with them that needs to be fixed, rather than the system that they're working in that needs to be fixed.
It's almost omitting women from being part of the quote good old boys club who hang out after work because they can't, because they have home duties to take care of that are more important than your after hours happy hour.
Yeah. It's a tough topic that isn't going to be solved in one day, but we have to be mindful of it. I was asked by everything's confidential, but I was asked by a company to speak for free for their women's group, and then they were flying their women in on a Sunday ahead of the men and asking the women to attend all-day trainings on a Sunday to help them in their leadership development. And the men in the company were just coming in on the normal time on a Monday and coming to the conference. And they had a good heart. They were coming from the right intentions, but it was being executed incorrectly, as hopefully you all can see. Yeah. So yeah, we want to be real mindful of that.
What does that say about how you prioritize the leadership if it's out of work hours? Would you say that putting these things during the workday, like, hey, we're going to take 3 hours on Monday morning every month to do such and such, this kind of development, whether it's management or introductory or whatever, but it's during work hours and we're cutting it out versus you have to stay after work or come in early to do it. I feel like, and I could be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like taking time out of the day puts a priority to that and almost like puts a premium on that training.
100. I mean, you're just hitting it right. It's right there. It's 100. You're 100% right. You're saying this is a priority in this organization, that we connect authentically with each other. We are doing these activities during paid work hours, and it's important. And when you stand up as a leader and you do that, it creates a ripple effect throughout your whole organization, because my leaders went to their employees and did the same thing. They kept it during operating hours. They didn't encroach on anyone's personal time. And it shows how important it is to productivity and profitability, and that it's not some extra thing that can be cut out. It's exactly what you just said.
Well, and honestly, for all listeners, I'm not all that smart, because that's in her Some Ground Rules to Ponder chapter, if I'm being authentic.
I wrote that. Never mind.
You did. You're very smart. You did write that. And I already subscribed to that method, but I was happy to see it in there, and I have to give you credit towards it. Last thing, Lafayette, and then you take it away.
Yes, sir.
That's okay. You have a chapter called More Than Smores.
Yeah.
And it was an interesting exercise, which is actually it might not be out of work. I pictured it that way. But you had mentioned it's essentially about connecting, getting people to connect at a deeper level. And you had talked about how Harvard Business Review did a study, and it showed that, quote, employees were not exhausted from their workloads per se, although I understand that some people may argue that has something to do with it. That's fine. But primarily because they were lonely. And that corporations need to work on how to alleviate that loneliness. Can you like expand on that?
Sure.
I think it's an incredible concept, because I don't know when exactly you wrote this, but with the pandemic bringing so much more remote work, not only has it shown that some employees have started to work longer, like there's no breaks. When you're at work, you say, okay, I got a lunch break, or I'm going to go to the bathroom break, or I'm going to go walk around the building with my friend break, or whatever. They're finding that the studies I've been reading is that the employees tend to just, there's no stop and or start and stop to the workday. It tends to just kind of drag through the day. So they may start at 8 or whatever time, but then they are at home, so they're kind of eating and working, and then it kind of drags a little past 5 into when the kids would come home, and so on and so forth. Which so they're saying there's no definite start and stop to someone's workday. It's just kind of a gray area for a lot of people. And not even intentionally. And maybe that's just they're less productive. I don't know. Maybe they're more productive. I have no clue. But this would add to that, because by default, if you're working at home, you're going to feel a little more lonely. You don't have anybody around you.
Yeah. So that article from Harvard Business Review was called The Loneliest Workers in America. And that actually came out pre-COVID. And what they found was that exactly what you just said, it might not be workload. It might actually be that individuals are feeling burnt out from isolation and loneliness. They equated loneliness and burnout to the healthcare costs of smoking 15 cigarettes a day in that research article. And when I wrote More Than S'mores, I almost didn't put it in the book, because I did a poll with my employees and I said, what was your favorite activity? They all voted for that one as the top one. And I'm like, that was so easy. I got everyone together on the beach during work hours. It was after a quarterly business review, and we had a bonfire and we had s'mores and cocktails, and except I required that each individual bring their favorite passage of inspiration or their favorite quote. And we went around the fire and they read it aloud, and then they shared why it was their favorite passage or quote at the time with each other. And it ended up being super profound. And it was something sort of simple that I had thrown together. And it hit me later when I was analyzing the results of their vote that they were lonely, and that really connected them and brought them together, because they were feeling isolated at the time and they saw the humanity in each other. So those things are things you can do on Zoom. I think what you're talking about too are two different things, because now COVID hits and now everyone's on Zoom, and companies are expecting employees, because now you're kind of getting into this lack of trust space where companies might not be trusting employees to work from home. And so then they're just loading up their calendar with Zoom appointments and not giving them any personal space for creativity and inspiration and innovation to flow. You can't go back to back in Zoom meetings and be innovative in your company. You have to have moments of silence and give your brain moments of rest for new things to spring forth. And then you're also talking about work-life enmeshment. You're talking about how people's lives have become enmeshed because they're working from home and they don't know how to separate that. We're all sort of experiencing that, right? We can work 24/7 now with technology. How do we shut off the work and focus on our family, friends, connecting, whatever that may be? And I'm not going to tell anyone how, but I'll coach them through what works for them. You know, everyone can write their own prescription for what works for them. I had a client that was a CFO for a company, and she was having that same issue, work-life enmeshment on Zoom. I'm sitting at my dining table all day in front of a camera, and then I'm in my home. I don't feel like I have a break. So she wrote her own prescription where she's like, I'm going to change out my office chair back to my dining chair. I'm going to walk upstairs. I'm going to change out of my work clothes, put my, comfy clothes on, and do this routine every night to where I'm like, okay, I'm going to try to cut the enmeshment. But I really think companies need to take a close look at how they're treating their people during this time, and how, if they're coming from a place of trust or from a place of auditing.
Incredible.
Really good.
Amy, was there anything else that you wanted to leave our audience with before we shift?
Are we ending already? Yeah, if you're interested in any of the stuff that we've been talking about, the SQ21, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to discuss it with you. You can follow me on LinkedIn. I do a weekly workplace message where I pull a card that's a message meant for everyone. And it's free, it's fun, and you can get some inspiration there as well. And of course, we mentioned my book quite a bit, but it's available on Amazon. But if you go to my website, I'll send you some free fun activity and an intention setting kit with my book. You can light it on fire and send your intentions for your work or your career out into the universe. See what happens.
Absolutely incredible. We usually shift into our read of the month because we have you as our special guest tonight. Go get Amy's book this week. We won't go into our read of the month. Go to Amazon. You said it is on Amazon, correct?
Mm-hmm.
On Amazon, it is Create Magic at Work. The author again is Amy Lynn Durham. This has been an incredible conversation. You can see it on the screen. John just put it up. Create Magic at Work. And again, we thank all of you that have watched, that will watch, that will share this with your family. Tag us there, hashtag Unscripted Leadership. Follow Amy on her various platforms, on her LinkedIn pages, on her Instagram, her YouTube channel, and her Facebook. Always follow us on Unscripted Authentic Leadership on our YouTube channel. You can go back and watch this. You can go back and listen to this. We'll also provide clips from this episode throughout the week. We're so excited. And again, we thank you, Amy, for being a guest on our show today. We are always here to build bridges and not walls, because bridges connect and walls divide. Until next time, we pray that you be the leader that God has called you to be.